And we provide training for HR professionals and company supervisors. And we provide divorce coaching and case management, providing guidance and direction that your divorcing employees so desperately need. And I want to introduce you to the amazing Paulette Rigo. Paulette is a certified divorce coach, a certified divorce specialist, credentialed mediator, and the director of coaching and management here at Divorce Right. And together, we tackle the biggest disruptor in your company, and that is divorce. As a reminder, we have SHRM credits for SHRM members, and we'll post a link to that at the end of this broadcast so that you can grab those. And today we're going to be talking about the high conflict divorce, how it impacts your employee, and how it impacts your company. And most importantly, we're going to give you important steps that you can take to support your employees to get through it. And we should start by stating at the very beginning that a high conflict divorce doesn't mean high violence. Physical violence is something that we will talk at another time, but today we're going to be talking to Jason Lavoie. Jason, aka the Divorce Resource Guy, is a former divorce attorney turned divorce coach who empowers people getting divorced by teaching them the information they need to know so that they can make the best decisions in their divorce. As a divorce coach, Jason works with people who have an attorney, who already have an attorney, and those who are representing themselves. The cliche is very true. Knowledge is power. What makes Jason different than other coaches is that he coaches from an attorney's point of view, and Jason helps you during all stages of the divorce process, from finding the right attorney for your situation, helping you create a strategy, and stay focused throughout the entire process. Jason offers both one-on-one coaching and group coaching programs, and he is the host of the Divorce Resource Guy podcast and will be an integral part of your divorce team. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jason.
Hi, Vicki. Hey, Paulette. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited.
I'm very, very excited. So, Paulette, I'm going to let you get us started.
Well, thank you for passing the baton. Let's dig in. So Jason and I met a while back during the pandemic, I think, when so many divorce professionals were able to connect when we normally couldn't. So we got to know each other, and I really respect his point of view. As Vicki mentioned, being a former attorney practicing, you really have a unique spin, thought, perspective on what this looks like, and so many of the common mistakes people make. But as we're going to dig into this topic of the high conflict divorce, let's first define that. So Vicki's already said that it isn't necessarily violence or any sort of domestic violence issues, although that could be an aspect of it. But what actually breaks down or constitute or defines a high conflict divorce?
Yeah, no, I'm glad Vicki said that at the outset, because a lot of people do get that confused. And when we start, talking about physical abuse and violence, that's really a whole separate bag. We could do, hours and hours just on that alone. So this is not that for today. But when we talk about high conflict divorces, another word for that often used is contested divorce. Where people are fighting over something, whether it's a division of assets, custody, parenting time. There's a dispute somewhere, and they're not agreeing. The two sides are not agreeing, and that creates the conflict. And so, of course, there's always different levels of what that conflict can look like. But when we speak about high conflict divorces, we're talking about cases where there's issues that are being contested.
So it isn't the normal low grade, we just can't make a decision if we should get divorced or shouldn't, or the emotional aspect of it. But as you use the term contested versus, uncontested, right?
Right. Yep.
There's specificity as to the argument, or the conflict is about specific legal or judicial decisions, right, that have to be made about legal custody or physical custody or parenting plans and the division of assets and debt, or maybe even spousal support. There's specific issues that they're really not agreeing on. It isn't just sort of the emotional aspect of, we're fighting a lot, but what are you really fighting about? Yeah?
Right. And it kind of, all this, when we start getting, when we start really talking about it, a lot of it gets like intertwined with each other, right? The
Mhm.
emotional aspect, and then what I would call like the business at hand of getting divorced. The problem is it's hard for people to separate the two. And that's what professionals like us try to do, is
Mhm.
really what we're trying to do, is separate it out and keep them focused on the business of getting divorced. But the conflict comes in, let's take parenting time, for example, or custody. If there's minor children involved and there's disagreement on, you know, where they're going to live, what the schedule during the week is going to look like, who's going to see them when. Um, that's where high conflict divorce is. Usually a big issue in a high conflict divorce. It's custody and parenting time.
Right. So we've
And
kind of defined that as, whether it's contested or not. And that means that even, let's say it's, you can't be 99%, it has to be 100%, right? You're either 100% in agreement with the settlement or the
proposal.
oh, the rule, right. So, or you're not, right? It can't be a little bit uncontested. Even if there's one little aspect of the case that you haven't agreed on, that would still define, in fact, that it's contested.
Right. I mean, if there's a little bit of conflict, it's still conflict. Right. And so, yeah, I guess you can't be half pregnant, as they say, right?
Mhm.
So, conflict is conflict. And when you can't get along and you can't even communicate with each other, I
Right.
think that's really a differentiating factor between regular conflict and high conflict, right? High conflict cases, you have people who can't even say hello to each other without getting into a fight.
Right.
And that's kind of an oversimplification of it, but they can't communicate. If two people could communicate with each other and kind of, again, handle the business at hand, and
Mhm.
focus on the best interest of the children, and okay, we disagree, but we'll handle it, like mature adults, and do it that way, that would be better. But when you have situations where they can't do that, and
Mhm.
you're just insulting each other via text, voicemail, or harassing one another, and it's just so dysfunctional. I think that really epitomizes what a high conflict is.
Right. I have to agree. So we've defined it as this uncontested nature. We just can't agree. Where we've got some things we've got to argue about and work on. And there's a lack of communication or little communication and a
Right.
lack of cooperation, right? They just don't want to cooperate, whether that be paperwork, meetings, or just they've shut down. So
Yep.
let's get into the real nature here. But how would that high conflict divorce affect someone in the workplace now that we know that they're in it, or they now know that they're in it, and it isn't a smooth sailing? How is that going to affect their work, and how would it affect them at work?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's often something that people don't sit down and think about, right? They just go about their lives, and most of the bulk of everybody's day is going to work, right, or and doing your job. And you think your personal life isn't really going to be part of that, but it is. Of course, it is. It's because your job is part of your life, right? You can't really separate out the two, even though we try to do that sometimes.
Right.
So, you know, if you're going through, the first thing I would say, and we all know this, right? Divorce is trauma. A contested divorce is real trauma. So you're going through a traumatic event. Of course, you're going to bring that to your workplace. I mean, I think it's almost impossible not to. I mean, people can handle it better than others, and they can learn techniques and stuff to handle it better, but it's impossible to totally separate it out, I think. So you're going to be dealing with your contested divorce, let's say, or a high conflict divorce, um, in some facet, whether it's consciously or subconsciously,
Mhm.
in your day. And a lot of it might be subconscious. I'm not a licensed therapist. I play one on TV, but I do see that um, again, it just will, you know, trauma. People deal with trauma, and trauma affects people differently. Um, but it affects you. Right? There's no getting around that. Uh,
Mhm.
So I think first you have to recognize that, right? And then you look for signs and symptoms of how that manifests itself, in the workplace.
Well, it's true that the workplace and the work life and the home place and the personal life are intermingled, right? It's almost impossible to separate them and have them not integrated at all. And when there's trauma, it's unavoidable to not have that melting or blending in of that stress or trauma that they're experiencing. It's almost impossible for them to not, right? Yeah.
Right. And an employer can't expect, or I think shouldn't expect, that their employees should be able to do that. Because we're all human beings, right? We haven't been taken over by robots yet. And so as human beings, we are susceptible to emotion and trauma, and that all has an effect on us mentally, emotionally, psychologically. So, we're not robots where you can say, okay, we're going to flip off the personal life while we're at work. And then we'll wait till we leave and clock out, and then we'll switch it back on. It doesn't work that way. So, for employers to think that that's a possibility or that's the goal, I think is misguided. They need to just deal with the fact that we're all people, and what's happening in our lives is going to affect what happens at work.
Right. I see it all the time. So now that we've kind of looked at that idea, when would an employee be likely to feel the effects of high conflict divorce in the workplace? Like, what signposts would HR professionals or business employees in corporate entities, what should they look for?
I think they should look for things that are out of character for somebody, right? So if we'll just call her Jane for our example today. If Jane's been working there 2 years, and you kind of have a good idea of who she is or who she is as a person and her emotional, what should we call it? Like her baseline emotional level,
Right.
for lack of a better way to describe it. Then if Jane starts acting, kind of erratically from whatever her baseline is, and that starts becoming more frequent or a habit, and you're like, well, what's going on with Jane? Those are some red flags, right? That something probably is going on, and it's affecting how she's behaving, right? And so there's nothing wrong with that, but you also don't want to just kind of sweep it under the rug and pretend that it's not happening. So how are we going to, from an employer's standpoint, like how are we going to figure out what's going on with Jane so she feels comfortable enough to maybe even address it, bring it up, and if there's resources available, then that's the whole idea of this, is to have them have these resources that are accessible to them to get the help that they need.
Right. So HR or any even peers that just notice, like, hey, what's up with Jane? A change in appearance, a change in mood, a change in diet. Are they eating a whole entire pizza, or they're starving themselves? Change in productivity, change in motivation or enthusiasm. They just don't seem like themselves. They're like a totally different character. Or there's a mood swing, right? One day they're on it, next day they're off. One day they're on it, next day they're off, because there's always going to be those highs and lows based on the trauma, the stress that they're affected by the divorce proceeding. Sometimes it's status quo, and other times, bam, you could get an email that could just blow your day to heck, right? Like,
absolutely.
Get that email and you're like, well, what do you mean and then they get a 42-page document that they suddenly have to read, review, approve, sign, and 9 seconds, maybe not 9 seconds, but there's a sense of urgency, right? Where that didn't happen. And all of a sudden their life is just flipped upside. So they're trying to get their report together or, do something. And all of a sudden they have to kind of like, oh, I can't really deal with this right now because I have to deal with this. And now they have to leave early because they got to go pick up their kid. And yeah, everything is just.
Yeah. Like how about this for an example? I think this happens more often than not, especially when custody or parenting time is a big issue in the divorce. It's 3 o'clock. So you're in the middle of the workday, right? For most people, if you're working till, let's say, 5 o'clock. And maybe you got a text message from your spouse or an email, and it was your turn or their turn, let's say, to drop off your child to you at 6 o'clock that night, and you get a text or something saying, I know it's your night, but I'm keeping them for whatever reason, and I'll drop them off tomorrow. Or you're going on, you had a trip planned on the weekend, it's Friday afternoon,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'm not going to give them over to you because I want to ruin your trip. Something intentional, just to screw with them, right? If they get an email like that during the day, what do you think that's going to do to you, right?
Yeah, something emotional.
Forget about what you're working on. Like, your whole world is now switching to, oh my God, I'm supposed to have my children. I have plans. What am I going to do? He's now threatening, yeah, everything's going to switch on a dime to that.
And with that said, I think gone are the days when, employers used to be able to say, and well, I mean, that's not true because they're still doing it now, but that leave your divorce at home, right? Don't bring that stuff here. That is probably the worst thing that you can do, because we found that the number one reason that employees quit within a year of their divorce is because they felt completely unsupported at work.
Right.
So it's really important, if you're listening to us today and you're in the HR department, understand that people need empathy and some awareness and resources to help them through it, because they are going through something that they have no idea how to manage. It is this crazy labyrinthine system. So why can't somebody easily maybe compartmentalize their divorce from their personal life? I know we just are kind of talking about this, but why do you think that it's not so easy to be done?
Because we're human beings. Like, it really comes back to that. We're not programmed to be able to compartmentalize like that. Now, we can learn to do better, right? We can learn through therapy and techniques to help us manage and cope better when things hit the fan. But you can't just say, going back to the example with the parenting time that we were just talking about, if that happens, you can't, as an employer, expect the employee who just got that text to say, oh, that's unfortunate, but let me get back to my report, right? It's just not going to work that way. And it wouldn't work that way if, the HR professional got that text or your boss got that text, right? Everybody's going to react. Well, everybody's going to react, I think, is the point, right?
Mhm.
Everybody might react differently, but you're going to react, because how can you not? If you didn't react to something like that, then perhaps that's another issue that we need to talk about, right? Because it would be human nature to react, and it's your personal life, it's your family, and again, it goes back to trauma. We're not talking about, I went to the store and they didn't have, your favorite cereal in stock, so you're gonna have to wait till next week. That's not what this is. This is real trauma that affects your family and your life, and your work is part of your life.
Right. So what can somebody that's in a high conflict divorce, how can they learn to better cope with a high conflict divorce? What do you think? What are some skill sets that they can bring, or you can bring to the table for them?
Well, I think it all starts with kind of preparing yourself, as best as possible. Like, for me as a divorce coach, what I do, if I start working with somebody, at the beginning of the process, maybe they know they're getting divorced, but nothing's happened yet. Nothing's been filed in court. Maybe they don't even have an attorney yet. That's even better, because then I could work with them to prepare. If you have time to prepare, then that's going to set your baseline at a whole better spot than somebody who hasn't prepared for divorce and is constantly reacting, right? You don't want to be reactive the whole time if you can help it. Now, there'll be times where you can't help it and something's going to happen and you react to that. But if you can anticipate as much as possible what's going to happen in the process, and and you're empowered with that information, that's huge, in my opinion. And then the second part of that is surrounding yourself with the right team of objective professionals to guide you throughout the process. And so that's what we do as coaches. I'm one member of the team as a coach, right? Other members of the team may include an attorney, a therapist, and it can go on and on depending on your situation, the type of people that you may need. But there's bedrock people that can help you, and you want those to be professionals versus friends and family, because friends and family are great and they have their place, but they're not going to be objective. And
Right.
And so you need that objective. I give you the good, the bad, and the ugly when I'm coaching you as a client.
Well, and that's the truth. So many people, talk to their friends and family that are particularly friends that have been through the divorce process before. I feel that can be some of the worst advice you ever get, is because, Susie got $150,000 in her settlement statement. She got her kids. She got to stay in the house, whatever. Right. I will assure everybody that's listening, each and every divorce has its own unique thumbprint. Nothing is ever the same. Nothing looks the same. And it's next to impossible to compare yourself to your neighbors, to your sisters, to your brothers, all of that. It's all out. So don't look to those people to give you advice unless they are in this profession and can show you from a professional's opinion. But other than that, don't listen to any stories about anybody's divorce stories. All you get are horror stories, and you get additional, agita from doing
Yeah.
that, right? And you had said something earlier about, preparing yourself. That's what we love, here at Divorce Right, is that through our Plan Right program, you can actually get a plan in place for yourself, not for your neighbor, not for your sister, not for your brother, the one that is right for you. And it's when you have that plan in place, what type of divorce, of which, by the way, people, there are 5 types of divorces in this country, 5 ways to end your marriage. It doesn't have to be with the biggest, baddest shark in your community. It can be done where you save money and saving your employees money, getting them the help and support where they don't necessarily have to spend their entire life savings to get out of their relationship. There are better ways to do this. And that's what I love about what we do. And so the last question then is, how can a divorce coach like yourself, like Paulette, help to prevent an employee from getting overwhelmed at work and at home due to the conflict?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And before I answer that, I just wanted to piggyback what you were just saying, about relying on friends and family and their war stories of their divorce. I always say divorce is like a snowflake. There's no two alike.
None.
And I don't care how similar they appear, to you, oh, we both have 2 kids. We both live in a house in the same town. Forget it. Yours is different, like you said. And until you just understand that, and, keep your friends, listen to them, but like, that's a great way. That's a great moment to compartmentalize what they're saying. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how can a coach help? Well, because as a member of your divorce team, which is how I like to characterize it, oftentimes we're going to be your first point of contact, right? Even when hopefully you'll get an attorney, if you're able to do that. And what do I mean by your first point of contact? So attorneys usually charge hourly, right? And that in and of itself is a huge point of contention with people going through the process. And again, we could spend a whole hour just on that. But
indeed, because I get, that's what I get on my soapbox.
Oh yeah, no. And so as a coach, when I stopped practicing as a divorce attorney and became a coach, I purposely structured all my fees to be flat fee based so that wasn't going to be an issue. And I'm glad I did that, because I can't tell you how much time I spend talking with clients about that issue. But it's the nature of the beast, and there's ways to handle it. But having a coach as your first point of contact, right? And you're not afraid to reach out to that person when, you have a question. And then let's say something comes up. The client would call me as a coach, and we would talk it out. And then at the end of that conversation, most of the time at that point, I'll be like, okay, assuming they have an attorney, I say, now go back to your attorney and ask them these 3 questions, right? And what does that do? Then that creates the communication between them and their attorney. It makes it so much more efficient. And so their attorney will appreciate that, and they'll only get charged for whatever time it takes to deal with those issues in the email, rather than calling your attorney, spending 45 minutes with them talking about it when that's not really their role, right? They're not a therapist.
Right.
Um,
That can I just say that the worst thing, at least that I see happen, is when people use their family law attorney as their therapist.
yeah,
Mhm.
no,
It is just money, just
it is.
speaking to somebody that doesn't necessarily understand, know the answer to that. And that's what, one of the things that we hear, time after time after time, is that people spend their money talking about the other issues in the divorce process that as an example, special needs children, government benefits, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, all of those things. These are attorneys that don't specialize in government benefits, right?
Right.
Or insurance things, or how to get a mortgage. The things that is necessary for your client to get a mortgage, that's not their job. Their job is the law. So when you use someone like a coach, like our coaches here at Divorce Right, we can set you up with, you've got a religious divorce. Yeah, we'll get you through that. What's your religion? Are you Jewish? Are you Christian? Are you Muslim? Are you Catholic? Let's get you the right person to help you through those problems. Whereas when you keep going back to your attorney, who is, one person that has their area of expertise, they understand the law, but using them to solve all of the other problems can be very, very expensive and not necessarily always in your best interest.
Right. And they don't want to do it either. Trust me. I knew, because as an attorney, I didn't want to do it. I would do it. And I would be honest with my clients when I would speak to them, and I say, okay, we're playing therapist now. I'm happy to do it. I'll talk to you for as long as you want. But then when you get the bill, don't complain to me about it. Right.
Mhm.
And so I was open and honest about it. But sometimes when they don't have these other professionals on their team to direct their attention to, when it's appropriate. And most people, this is it. Most people think they're getting divorced. The only thing they have to do is hire a divorce attorney, and then they wash their hands of it and they're done. That's not the best way to do it, and unfortunately that's the way most people do it, because they don't know about these better ways to do it.
Right.
One
And
friend-
also working with a divorce coach to supplement quickly what Jason said is it's a very intimate, personal, one-on-one, sacred, safe container where you can feel heard and seen and validated and not judged. You don't have to worry about flaring up drama or family dynamics or taking it to work. You can compartmentalize as best as you can without understanding that sometimes when you get that last minute text or email at work, processing it, texting, oh my God, do you have a few minutes to talk about this later? So at least you've created a proactive resolution to that one little conflict at the moment. It's they need to really feel understood, and they need to feel that they have that resource they need. I always suggest they have several pads of paper, questions for Paulette or divorce coach, questions for Jason, questions for attorney, questions for therapist. And then they realize oh, what's the overlap?
Right.
Is it the same question for each person? Are they significantly different questions? They should be. And then you can eliminate, if every single question is the same for me and the attorney and the fiduciary and the mental health professional, that's a problem. And they need to work through that, helping them think rationally, because their mind goes to mush. So,
Yeah. And that's a byproduct of the trauma, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And right. And I think of it, everybody wears a little hat or stays in their lane. And that's what you want. You want your lawyer to wear their lawyer hat. And I just have pictures of this little top hat everybody's wearing when I say this, but right. And then, your coach has a little coach hat on, and then your therapist, if you have one, has a little therapist hat on, and we each do different things. And when you put it all together, you have yourself a well-managed divorce. It's not going to solve every problem, because if in a contested divorce or a high conflict divorce, right? You're going to have conflict. But then if you have the tools to handle the conflict and manage it the best way, and again, going back to an employer, if your employees have the tools to manage their trauma in a good way or the best way possible, that's all only going to transfer over to doing better and focusing better while they're at work and doing their job.
And teaching them the skills to diffuse conflict, so they don't want to be part of the problem.
Right.
We need to teach them to be part of the solution, and that will also show up in their work and their productivity, because let's face it, conflict happens at work too.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Jason, you have been so awesome. Thank you so much for joining us here today. So do me a favor and let's put your contact information. What's the best way to contact you?
So the best way to reach me is through my website, jasonlavoie.com. Keep it easy. And my email is jason@jasonlavoie.com. So feel free to always shoot me a message, and I'll get back to you right there.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm putting this up there right now so that everybody can see that. Wonderful email address for Jason. Jason, you're so awesome. Thank you for joining us today. And everybody else, thank you so much for being on this live LinkedIn podcast. And we look forward to seeing you each and every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, where we talk about the things that matter with divorce in the workplace. So thank you all so much, and we will see you all next week. Bye for now.